Hey, we're back with another episode of Before You Buy, the show where we give you some straight-up gameplay and our first impressions of the latest games releasing. Hi, folks, it's Falcon, and oof, we got something different for you. Well, not so different that it's alienating, but something that feels fresh. I'm talking about HiFi Rush, which comes to us from Tango Gameworks, developers of Ghostwire Tokyo and The Evil Within, and published by Bethesda. It is the very last thing I would expect from any company involved with it. What we have here is a rhythm action platformer that harkens back to a lot of really fun games that I can remember throughout the years, and I'm going to have to say this one is one where the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. So I'm going to say right off that this is a game targeted at people who like games with some forward-moving momentum and energy. Now, that doesn't mean it's fast like Sonic or something like that, but this here made me think of, say, Jet Set Radio, made me think of Jak and Daxter. At times, it made me think of Mega Man, not necessarily in gameplay, but some of the power-up mechanics in Devil May Cry and Bayonetta, and it all does this in the context of a rhythm game. So here's the setting. You're a mid-20s guy named Chai. You're disabled on your right arm, and you want to become a guitarist. So you go to the campus of this company called Vandalay Technologies. I'm pretty sure it's a George Costanza reference, but they don't really acknowledge it. And you volunteer for this test program called Project Armstrong. Essentially, they replace your arm with a robot arm. Chai manages to get fused to his, I think, iPod. I mean, we haven't had those in a long time, but I'm pretty sure it's an iPod, and becomes a quote-unquote defect, and nobody's too happy about it, so they try to recall him, which means they try to destroy him. During the course of the first level, you encounter a robot cat named 808, who is kind of a helper, adds more to your attacks, and the cat's used as kind of a radio for a mysterious character ultimately named Peppermint, who you don't really meet until after the end of the first level, who progresses the story forward by making a deal with you about what the plot is ultimately about. Now, I'm not going to spoil the story, but you're ultimately up against a lot of technology-oriented stuff, both corporate and artificial intelligence alike. I personally think the story is fine. It's not astounding in any way. And sometimes the cutscenes get a little irritating because they go on longer than they should, it seems like. Their pacing is much more reminiscent of something much older, be it a cartoon or whatever. I'm used to even live action stuff being paced a lot quicker than this. And maybe that's my problem with the cutscenes and not that the cutscenes have a problem. I don't know. They don't matter though, because they're not going to detract from anything. And the story, like I said, it's fine. The characters are charming, and that's really what matters in something like this. So let's talk a little bit more about mechanics. This game kind of does for an action platformer what Hellsinger does for an FPS. If you have that in your mind, this isn't going to confuse you at all. And if you don't, the excessive tutorials that seem very slow and annoying at the start will ensure that you understand what you're doing. That's probably my only actual real complaint about the game. It takes a long time to just get through all of the semantics at the start of it, but once it does, it's just fun. So, while you are in a level, there's a song playing. There is a beat, and you have a light attack and a heavy attack. Light attack takes 1 beat, heavy attack takes 2. Combos you do on the rhythm, and the better you do on the rhythm, the more damage you're going to do ultimately. If that feels like it might scare you entirely off the game, it's actually not required that you attack on rhythm. But like I said, if you do it on rhythm, you get higher damage. There's also combo finishers that you could only get by doing it on the rhythm. That said, you could play this game the whole way through without paying any attention to that. It'd probably be a little bit harder, but yeah. You have small enemies, you have big enemies, and you have bosses. And we're going to talk a little bit about the bosses in a minute because they're great, but we've got good platforming challenges, although I was a little irritated that it took me as long as it did to tell me that I could sort of dodge dash. Because in games where you can do that, I do that all the time. It was in the first level, but I'll be frank, it feels like a long time. A lot of the first level is cutscenes, establishing what's going on, as well as telling you how to play the game. Once you get a feel for it, it's not weird at all. Again, if you've played Hellsinger, that's a really good analog. I really enjoyed Hellsinger, although it was absolutely ruthless to me, as Sometimes it's hard to hear the music over the sound effects, and therefore it's hard to keep in time. That's something I didn't really have a problem with here. But while you're playing a game like this, it's best to tap your foot to the beat or nod your head to the beat, because you'll find that you'll automatically be doing combos exactly how the game wants you to be doing them, because you're like, okay, combo, yes. I realize that that's a kind of stupid way of explaining it, but when you play the game, that's what you're doing. The whole time you're just like, and it feels great. Same with Hellsinger, and I'm going to try not to bring that game up a whole lot because they are completely different games, but there's something satisfying about a combo in combat that is fixed to a beat that gives you a satisfaction that is above and beyond the satisfaction one might get if this wasn't a rhythm game. There is more throughout the whole game. There's new moves. There's various buffs. By the end of the whole thing, you feel pretty badass. So remember I said there's bosses. Even the first boss is fantastic right off the bat. This is a rhythm game, so much of it has to do with the soundtrack and the beat. And I get into that first boss's room, and 9 Inch Nails 1 Million comes on, and I'm just like, all right, it's about to go down. And even this early in the game, we get a boss that feels both familiar and fresh. And that's probably the two best words you can use to describe this game, because I'm dodging attacks, using double jumps and dashes to stay in the air. I'm attacking weak points. I'm doing combos. There's even rhythm-based QTEs that are there. I mean, don't worry about those. They're really not complex to get. But it all integrates into this one battle that feels really epic because the music is big, the boss is big, and a confluence of factors from very responsive controls to the rhythm dynamic to the visuals. I mean, this is a fun game. It really first comes together at that boss because they're done telling you how to play the game. After you beat the boss, you go to a hideout where you can do things like upgrade Chai, the main character's equipment, learn new stuff, etc., etc. That's where Peppermint hangs out and the story ensues from there. You want to get off Vandalay Island, you're going to have to participate in her little overarching scheme, which ends up being the whole thing. So I mentioned the sound. Like, obviously, this is a rhythm game. The soundtrack is very important. And I'll say this, like, the balance of sound is very good because I'm never missing out on the soundtrack. I'm always hearing the beat, and that's really important when you have to attack on the beat. I mentioned Hellsinger earlier when quickly talking about this, but there's actually a few action rhythm hybrids where the sound can get too chaotic to keep with the rhythm. And this game, I never had that problem with. On top of that, they also have a visual indicator that you can turn on to see the beat as well as hear it. The dialogue's all well acted, which is great, but because of the aesthetic they were going for here, they could actually probably have bad acting and it would have been charming. That said, it is appreciative when you see what plays out very much like kind of a cartoon that looks like a mesh between a Goofy movie, Kingdom Hearts, and Jet Set Radio. That said, it's much more detailed than a Jet Set Radio. Really, everything has a lot of life. The animation is, like I said, very comparable to a Goofy movie from the 1990s. In fact, everything about this game is kind of comparable to the 1990s. Soundtrack is really good. I mentioned 9 Inch Nails already, but there's quite a few other really good songs that you might recognize. Some you might not recognize. And they included this really fantastic feature that I think that more games with licensed music need to start doing, because a lot of people stream games now, both big streamers and, small streamers that maybe have friends and a small amount of followers join in when they're playing a game. There are two versions of the soundtrack, and you can turn on the streamer version, which includes all original music. I think the original music's actually pretty good too, and gives you a preview of what the game will be like in 20 years when it's re-released. The people who made the original soundtrack are called the Glass Pyramids. Like I said, I think it's actually a pretty good soundtrack, the alternate version. I keep it on the licensed version just because some of the songs are really hype for the bosses. There's a definite replayability to this game because A, it's a rhythm game and you can pretty much always do better. And if you've aced it on the difficulty level you played it on, you can always go up one. However, on my second playthrough, I'm absolutely going to skip pretty much all of the cinematics. I said to you, yes, the characters are charming, and there's probably parts I will watch through them, but there's also times it really just seems like the cinematics are dragging. Personal taste, you may think otherwise. It's such a minor thing, too, that it's, I mean, honestly, not something that would affect how good I consider the game to be. Also, after you beat it, there's a new mode, a survival mode. It'll also remind you of the survival mode from Devil May Cry. Not my cup of tea. I don't really care a whole lot about that mode, but I know that there's people who really love that stuff. Like, I know that there's a subset of Devil May Cry fans who really care about the Bloody Palace thing. I'm not one of them, but I want to mention that for those people. All in all, this is really a great package. Initially, I thought Jet Set Radio from all of the art and visuals, but I think that it really is kind of its own unique thing. But that's what drew me in. I didn't expect for it to be this good, this deep, this enjoyable, because I didn't really know what to expect. It certainly wasn't what I got, because I'll be honest, I didn't even know it was a rhythm game going on. The gameplay mechanics, the sound, the soundtrack, the level design, and the boss design all come together to really create what kind of feels a bit like an indie experience, because honestly, you don't really see big developers make stuff like this anymore, but it's also very clear that the budget is a lot higher, particularly in the animation. I loved Hi-Fi Rush. I'd absolutely recommend it as a game you buy. Tons of fun. I'm definitely double dipping, doing a second playthrough probably over the weekend. I'll say if you don't like any of the games I kind of mentioned that contribute as an influence to this game, might be worth checking it out on Game Pass rather than purchasing, but it's not exactly an expensive game either. Base price of $29, 10 to 12 hour game. In my opinion, worth every penny. And like I said, it's on Game Pass, and that's the reason I tried it. It was a good call to do that, because I really can't recommend it enough for somebody who likes any of that stuff.
And that's all for today. Leave us a comment. Let us know what you think. If you like this video, click like. If you're not subscribed, now's a great time to do so. We upload brand new videos every day of the week. Best way to see them first is, of course, a subscription, so click subscribe. Don't forget to enable all notifications, and as always, we thank you very much for watching this video. I'm Falcon. You can follow me on Twitter at FalconTheHero, and we'll see you next time right here on gameranx.